Om Te Gyan Yoga Nugata Pasyan Devatma Shaktim Swagunayar Nagudam Yaha Karinani Nikilani Tani Kalatma Yuktanya Adidishtat Yekaha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Practicing the yoga of meditation, the ancient rishis of India beheld the Devatma Shakti, the divine power, existing everywhere and in everything, and who, though veiled by her own powers of nature, called the Gunas, was nonetheless one and indivisible, and who had been imperceptible to them earlier, due to the limitations of their own intellects. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Yes, and we meet here to meditate ourselves upon the Devatma Shaktim, as the Upanishads have just told us, and along with Shankara's underlying support of those great truths. Upanishad Mahastram, the great Upanishads of ancient India, out of which these teachings of Atmagyan and Dharma and even lower truth proceed, all in a timely order. And we want to make sure we keep it in that kind of order and raise our minds, as we were talking about last week with the hot air balloon chart, which is right here on my right, if you remember. Raise our minds to a higher level of consciousness where everything makes sense. Lower it again and all of a sudden the confusion dances in. That's how they describe the world bewitching Maya. It's there when you give it room. Immediately you take away that room, it's gone. So it's neither real nor unreal nor a combination of both. Shankara goes on saying, it's just insinuates itself whenever the limitation of your own intellects, as we were just talking about, takes the field of the mind over and begins to take the shape of objects. Thoughts take the shape of objects, a Father of Yoga says. And just like fire that takes the shape of what it's burning, a log or a milk carton or whatever it is you put in the fire, then all of a sudden the mind comes along too, and it burns like that in the shape until one decides to, as the Upanishads ask us to do, I go for refuge to that Brahman, whose light turns the attention of the mind of mankind to the Atman, and who resembles fire that has burned all its fuel. So to understand a mind like that, that's free and pure, is to be one with Brahman. Anything less than that is to be in an encounter with the Lord's Maya, Brahman's Maya, which exists in it like poison exists in a snake, to make it more clear. But it actually doesn't exist at all when you bring the light of this Atmagyan, or this higher teaching, in, and try and live that way. It's the non-dual essence is present there in many of those statements. One has to mull it over in the mind a long time and take it deep and make it a part of one's thinking process. We just made Brahman influence our thinking process instead of the fault-finding of the world. The world has plenty of faults with it. We should be observing them from a distance, knowing that the mind created the worlds and the mind's an imperfect vehicle. But pure mind is different. The impure mind cannot realize Brahman, but the pure mind can realize Brahman, Sri Ramakrishna said. So you'll hear both of those opinions given by the seers in the scriptures, depending on what level of philosophy they're talking about. Dualism, Advaita, or qualified non-dualism, Vishishta Advaita, or Advaita, non-dualism. The mind should be able to be going back and forth between these as if in 3 steps, always retaining what's beyond the Triputi. There's so many triple teachings around, and we'll look at a few of them today. But one of them that we're studying last week and that we're continuing on with this week were the 3 Gunas of Prakriti, which is half the title of this class series. The other is the Vrittis of Yoga. And so that's taking 2 great darshanas of India that must be maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years apart, they say. Lord Samkhya's system with the Gunas of Prakriti, and then flash forward all the way to BC, well, probably AD, maybe 140 AD, with Patanjali, who was at that time giving us the 8 limbs of yoga in a very condensed and beautiful way. And the 8-fold path was prior to him, 650 years with Lord Buddha. So they're all thinking in terms of these methods that are time-tested, long-lived, eternal, if you will, that are coming back in cycles just like everything else. So they too are a part of Maya. Maya is rather sort of a carrier of these things, an insentient carrier. Consciousness is the sentient carrier, though. So we want to focus in on the Lord of Maya, Ishvara, we call it. It's a new politics we were just talking about. Basically, I give up the world politics and I renounce it now because it's flawed, it's distorted, it's committing evils, it's breeding karmas, and it can't be fixed. You can't fix an old, worn-out system. The new politics is this, that Ramakrishna is the new president of the world. He's the president. And his advisors are the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. They're overlooking the whole thing. We'll come back to this, finish up this chart. You can see the Trinity is overlooking the whole thing. All of its confluence of gunas and all the thinking processes of all the beings at all levels. So that would be the advisors of Ishvara. And then the gods and goddesses, Indra and so forth, and would be like the cabinet or the Congress. And now I'm a devotee of that system, a world system, a 7-world system. And it's been in existence from time out of mind, and it keeps returning to give rise to everything else, even to the collective and individual minds that follow it. Because the mind, we know, produces the bodies. The parents are just incidental to the process. So the mind is producing these physical bodies, and it's existing in a subtle state in what people call, provisionally, religions call heaven. And there are many levels of that, of those worlds, those heavens. Life heavens are called, a phrase coined by Sri Aurobindo. The life heavens, that's where you travel along inward channels when you return to your ancestors, or to the realm of the gods, or to the realm of the Trinity, or pass through all of that when you're going to unite with Brahman, like a hailstone falling into an ocean, Shankara says, in the Viveka Chudamani. So, and all of this is happening in one big cosmic dream, a mass collective mental dreaming of billions and billions of souls. And all of these levels are being fed by these souls who believe in them, and who, like you would visit countries in this Borloka on earth, Spain or France or India, people are visiting the world loka. So basically, some of the seers are saying, do you really want to check yourself into that hospital called the earth? And Sri Ramakrishna said, why did you ever check yourself in there to begin with all the diseases there? And so that, well, you're going down there, then so be it. But actually, the one thing the Burloka has that's good, the food. So you can go enjoy the food there. Make sure you get the organic, vegetarian, pure, cooked with mantra style food, and you'll be fine down there. And it'll give you strength in your body so that you can overcome the influence of the three gunas. You read the Gita, all of you, and many of you watching. Welcome, the live streaming audience. The Gita, right at the end there, he saves that teaching about the three kinds of foods that are infused with the three kinds of gunas, and how the tamasic food is refuse, stinking and stale, no vitality in it. And the next level, rajasic food, is salty and saline and infused with very heavily spiced and so forth, hot. And people have a appetite for that kind of food. But the sattvic food is very balanced and gives rise to light. See? Rajasic food helps give rise to anger. Sattvic food gives rise to peace and so forth. Tamasic to dullness. So he's using all these triputis, or triple teachings, about the gunas. So last week we looked at the gunas. You remember the charts we had. We had the hot air balloon first and looked at how gunas affect the klista and aklista vrittis, which were likened to sandbags, that you had a knife of discrimination that you were cutting each sandbag off because you wanted the balloon to soar. So it would be a simple way to describe sadhana, or our practice would just be to, as actually my mentor, our founder Lexington, and when I was in my 20s and he was in his 30s, told me, just think of everything in your mind that's a weight upon your consciousness that keeps you from thinking about divine reality, and cut that away. Just renounce it on the spot. That's going to be your practice. So you're going to have to find those things and not run away from them. And you're going to have to see how they came into being, what the cause of them is, and go to the source, the cause, and cut them away with that sword of discrimination, or that sharp knife of honed intellect. Because they couldn't see the Devatma Shakti in the beginning when they were meditating because of the dullness of their own intellect. So that's one of the four aspects of that dual mind we're talking about, is the buddhi. And so we're saying in the way in the car, on the way over here, don't shake it. Don't shake your buddhi. Because that's vibrating it. And vibrations come from gunas, and gunas give rise and influence your thoughts, and thoughts vibrate the whole picture. If you can keep your thoughts positive, that's half the battle. But you're going to have to always resist negative thoughts from coming in. As long as you're aware of the positive, you're aware of the negative. Sri Ramakrishna put it. Good and bad are chains that hold, one of iron, one of gold. So they go together. But if you can reach that sattvic station, pure sattva even, as Shankar describes it, where you'd rather be investing your consciousness, honing your intelligence, and placing your thoughts into the revealed scriptures that tell you the truth, nothing but the truth. So help me, Brahman. Then basically you'll fare well in this world. You can make a one-visit stop here. See, through these subtle nadis, or nerve endings, from the mind to the brain to the body. So many vessels, so many channels, right? But we're only looking in medicine and in psychology and so forth at the ones that are in the body and brain. We have to start looking in our subtle body for the nadis that the yogis travel along consciously when they meditate, and when they go from birth to death, birth to life to death and to rebirth, in a more conscious way than we can. Should a man be reborn? Somebody asked Swamiji. I certainly hope he will not. not until he can do so in full consciousness. So he took a body, others took a body, and they showed us how to live in it and how to keep its desires to a minimum and the passions to a minimum. Because all those things exist in the mind, and you have to take a mind before you take a body. The mind is the subtle body. And so its thoughts are taking shapes as objects. You're objectifying everything with the mind's thoughts. So if you take this inward path to de-objectify things, that is, as my teacher used to put it, why don't you concentrate on the eternal subject rather than the infernal object? The eternal subject rather than the infernal object. I remember once I left something in the hall as I was walking through the ashram, and I just went away for a minute, and there he was on the scene yelling at me, "Whose object is this? Whose thing is this? Get it out of the hall." So he was, of course, a renunciate, and so he didn't really like objects and things, especially ones in the way. And I think that's probably a very good object lesson for humanity, is that to let go of all of these objects, because they came out of your own mind. You can have them anytime you want. As we were speaking recently, that same man who didn't like objects said you should be able to attach and detach at will, not just detach. And we say sometimes if the mind can only associate with things, then that's better than attaching to them. But the problem with association, if you want to take that teaching deeper, is that sometimes you're not fully present when you associate. You're holding something in reserve when you associate with something. So there's some fear there, or some reservation, you see. So why not just attach fully, but have the ability to detach immediately? And this was he was talking about. You should be able to attach and detach immediately and instantly at will. So Sri Ramakrishna told the story about Krishna lifting the footstool. You see, he lifted the mountain of Govardhan when he was just a baby and held it as an umbrella over the village, saved it from the rainfall. A couple of weeks later, his uncle says, "Would you bring that footstool over here?" And Sri Krishna said, "I can't do that. I'm just a baby. I can't lift it." But 2 weeks ago, he had lifted Mount Govardhan. So that's this ability to attach to things and detach from them immediately. If I want to affect a Herculean feat, then I'm into it, and I do it. If I can't do that anymore, then I'm not into it. I can't do it. But it's all spontaneously, and comes up in the abilities of a perfected soul like that, an avatar in that case. So if you remember right, we were showing how this innate perfection gets veiled or influenced or flavored by the gunas, and we were concentrating more on the gunas last week than we were on the vrittis. So now we have to bring the vrittis more to bear, which has to do with this new chart I promised to show you, which I have brought. But remember, we were looking at this old warhorse in the meantime, and got halfway through it by the time we ran out of time last Sunday. So let's finish that, and then I'll show you this new chart, which works the thoughts into it. When I thought about the gunas myself, and I don't know, maybe 5, 6 charts I've put together on the gunas alone, including Shankara's sword fighting, the 3 sword fighters, was a good chart we can look at. But this was one of the ones that kind of stretched itself beyond just Prakriti. It had to do with mind, as you can see, and one's actions. Thought is father to the deed. So the gunas influence everything, but people forget about them. So nowadays we're thinking moods instead of modes. Moods are emotional. They come from our emotions. I'm in this mood, I'm in that mood. I'm in a mixed mood, I'm in a bad mood, I'm in a good mood. I'm in a passive mood, I'm in an active mood. But that doesn't trace anything back to anything but your emotions. So you want to be able to use a more current politic, see, like a more current psychology then. that would be the yoga psychology that was influenced so heavily by Lord Kapila when he authored the Samkhya system, Samkhya Yoga. Sankhya very much, we say to him. So he has these 3 gunas, and he wants to show us that these influence our thoughts, and if we can control them, then our meditations can get deeper, and study of scriptures can gain more clarity, and our minds can not just suffer attachment or even just associate with things, but can actually detach fully from things at will when they want to. So we looked at this chart from the bottom up. So we looked at tamas, for those of you who weren't present last time, and then we looked at tamo rajas, and we looked at rajas, and we arrived at rajasattva. So the 3 gunas are there, tamas, rajas, and sattva. But you could see the admixture of things so that it's not oversimplified, because there are times when, say, you'll feel a combination of restless to do something but too lazy to do anything about it. Or you might feel like really wanting to do something about it, but thinking, well, it's really not that necessary, I'll just remain quiet. It's easier that way. So Rajas and Sattva get together and influence you. So whatever the case may be, the going really gets good. It's rough here, and we looked at how that affects the mind and activity and what its effects are in nature. Nature, by the way, in India is both unmanifested Prakriti and manifested Prakriti, and we're here in the midst of manifested Prakriti. Our minds and what the thoughts and everything are more towards the direction of the unmanifested Prakriti, especially our deep sleep state, where the seeds are all there, are all present there, the seeds to everything. So when we begin to move in meditation, or we begin to contemplate, or we begin to ruminate, or we begin to even brood on higher things inwardly, the gunas are going to be there as an impetus or an impedance. So basically you're going to have to deal with them and utilize them to your own advantage, because they're insentient, but they're also there at the very hub of what many people would call creation, but what we call projection, where the first objects as worlds come from of the unmanifested seeds. That train of things, if you can follow the 24 cosmic principles down, but if you follow intelligence down, it's got its own way of remaining distinct from the insentient things, like oil and water stay separate. As we always say, you can't mix them for very long. So just like that, one part of that is the soul, and the other part's nature, and that's what I just chanted. It's the primal cause of a relationship between matter and consciousness. Is this Devatma Shaktim that we're talking about? So can make impossible things possible for at least a given time, but time is one of the problems, because the gunas depend heavily on the first cycle of time to make their appearance. That's called a Mahayuga when that happens. Satya Yuga kicks in, then Treta Yuga, then Dvapara Yuga, then Kali Yuga, which we're supposed to be in right about now, somewhere in the middle of the thick of that. And then, that all gets dissolved back into the great mind, and there's a great rest, Mahapralaya, which really pertains a little bit more to the insentient things and seeds, but we would call it Nirbija Samadhi. See, the soul actually takes its rest too, different from nature. It separates itself out to get its rest. So beings who are constantly thinking about Maya rather than non-duality, as I mentioned earlier, they tend to sleep like birds and foxes, Christ says, in nature. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, but the soul has no place to lay its head in nature. So when it lays its head at the feet of the Lord, or the feet of the Mother, or in Brahman, all being somewhat the same by the time Mahapralaya comes along. And nature is just resting there, stewing in its own insentient juices, as it were, as little seeds that will get empowered, bijams, when the Trinity first appears, when the great souls first come. And Lord Vishnu sees some strange guy coming out of his navel on a lotus. So who's that? I'm here to begin everything again. And you have to support it, Brahma says to Vishnu. And don't worry, Shiva will destroy it later. But that's coming. So after Mahapralaya, this is how they describe it, using some metaphors and some envisionments. How the Lord in form, Saguna Brahman, will be the Lord of the worlds, and the Mother will be the Mother of the worlds. And this process can go on, and will go on continually. So there's no big beginning and middle and end to anything, as Krishna says in the Gita. So if you're looking at this from the standpoint of gunas and thoughts, it gets more to the crux of the whole situation, is how to know the inner workings. Remember last week we were talking about our friend the Dalai Lama, when he was young, taking apart clocks and putting them back together and so forth. He had a fascination to see how things worked internally. So that's good to know about the world, but it's even better to know as a yoga psychologist, to know how the mind works, not only on the cosmic level, but on the collective level, which is a mass collective mental dream, and then on the individual level when you're trying to help people wake up from that dream when they want to. Oh, Mother, will you wake me up when I hear the call of nature? The little boy says to his mother, don't worry, you'll do that yourself when it happens. And if you don't, we all know that young boy's fate, shame the next morning. So to wake up from this old witch, the world, if you want to quote Vivekananda about Maya and what it foists upon the human mind, how the suffering and masks enjoyment, and good, bad masks good, and smoke masks fire, and the embryo masks the womb masks the embryo. All of these things are covering powers that are going on inside of Maya, and the soul can decide to tear those coverings away, or to never have them in the first place. And that's what we see in the great souls. They're very quick to tear the mask of Maya away from their face. And Shankara did it like in 8 years, an 8-year-old boy. So we already know Jesus at 14 was walking around, I have to be about my Father's business. So he was already beginning his journey at a young age to try and wake people up from this sleep of Maya. Also could call it samsara, if you want to use that word. So Maya and samsara are beginning to take to their heels when you transcend this pink of Rajasattva and actually find a key to your consciousness, which is probably going to be helped along by finding a teacher and getting a mantra. And so that's where we left off last week, and let's finish this quickly so we can look more specifically to the connection of gunas and vrittis. But you can see here that I've put it in such a way that we have to look at it first in nature, and I didn't finish what I wanted to say about that, but manifested and unmanifested Prakriti, we only know about manifested Prakriti here on earth, most beings, most nations, most religions, even most intelligent people. So the unmanifested Prakriti has become a thing of the past, a lost principle. And it explains away almost all the problems that we're facing right now, is to believe in something like rebirth, unmanifested Prakriti, and the supremacy of the gunas until such a time when the mind can willfully overcome them. Both the chants I used to start out this class stated that the gunas were in the way, and they were the cause of the original cycle of Mahayugas. They'll come forth to help that along, and beings will follow accordingly with their thoughts, dark thoughts, mixed thoughts, sweet thoughts, until such a time when maybe the possibility of no thoughts will arise. I think I'll just make the chitta vritti stop vibrating and see what that's like. And then you're automatically inside of 1 second looking back to the beginning of time as soon as you stop your thoughts, because the whole thing proceeded from a thinking mind. So you can put yourself right there at the beginning of this stream, when the first inception of things, if you have that kind of power. You might want to sit for, you might want to walk for 12 days and 12 nights in the wilderness to do that, or you might want to sit under a big tree for 49 days like Buddha did, to get the angle, the perspective right, so that you can see yourself, know thyself, and you shall be set free. So things like gunas and the thought process only really get studied at their source by high-minded souls. They get utilized by intelligent people without questioning. They take those things for granted. Oh, I think, you see. That's why you come up with this, I think, therefore I am nonsense. But no, it's I am, therefore I think, is the real truth of the matter. So you're falling into this backwards Maya game when you think that way. And when you don't think, Maya doesn't have anywhere to lodge itself anymore. Because where else would it be but in your mind and its thinking process to begin? But it has other things in store for you, all the way down to suffering and miseries and so forth. So if you look across the board here at sattva, if you reach the sattvic state and you can master the sattva guna, mastering means you can hold it. That's a penultimate goal for teachers for their student. If you can just remain, in this even state of mind and refuse to fall any lower than that standard, use that as your default zone, and if restless comes, renounce it. Dullness comes, see through it. So if you reach that sattvic state, that's when nature begins to obey you. Before that, it's resisting you all the time, and you're fighting it, as is seen by people in the world trying to extract resources from it and dominate over it and so forth. Man, this little tiny being, even with 7 billion of them, the world is so big, you'd have to have billions and billions of people to use up all the space on the ocean, in the desert, and in the mountains. This world is so vast. So you have to think that this little form, 2.5 cubits high, as remember Krishna said, gets into all sorts of mischief in nature. And it came from such a small thing as a sperm, he said. So this is all the wonders of Maya, the workings of Maya. And the gunas are, of course, right there being operated in that scenario. So nature comes under your control when you can observe it from a distance in a peaceful mind. And probably at that point, resist the diseases. I'll show you that probably at the second half, the hospital of this world. How many diseases can come and overtake people who are imagining themselves to be a body and imagining this world to be a real location in time and space. Everything here exists in the mind. We're in the mind right now, and the objects have been created from the mind. So it's all mind-only schools in India. And there you see, speaking about the mind, the next category is in the mind. Intense spiritual practice for gaining knowledge becomes possible there. In activity, performing all work free of selfish motive. So that's where the yogas become more possible across the board. Pure sattva is something that we get a hint about from Shankara. It's not necessarily mentioned much. They pretty much leave it to Tamo, Rajas, and Sattva, even the Gita. But Shankara came up with those beautiful cross-section of higher sattva in the Viveka Chudamani, and he was talking about the mind's penchant towards doing sadhana or spiritual practice. Now you want to gather time to pick up that scripture, or to sit longer in meditation, or to do worship of the Lord in form, and along with performing all work free of selfish motive. All work as worship, Vivekananda coined that phrase. So you're going to want to, not just want to, but you're going to have the tendency to lean towards higher sattva. And it's going to have less sandbags on your balloon at that point, because you've already worked yourself through this and you've decided that's not where you want to be with birds and their nests and foxes in their holes. You want to be in sattva all the time. And the higher the sattva, the better. And we'll look at what higher sattva means in one of the next charts. I think basically pure sattva then is about, if I take activity first, performing all work free of selfish motive, actually as a higher way to go with that when you're actually serving God and all beings. It doesn't have anything to do with motives anymore, or non-motives, or being good, better, and best. It has to do with actually seeing the Lord in all things and all beings and serving wholeheartedly. A whole heart man. Vivekananda coined that phrase too. And he said that was his man-making policy, that he wanted all people to be whole heart men, put themselves into it completely. The soldier has no business, telling the general, "I'm not going into war." He's got to fling himself into war wholeheartedly and do his duty. Vivekananda used that analogy. So that's the way you want to be with spiritual practice and commitment and so forth, in order to use this higher sattva to its best condition. If you want to look at that same pure sattva in the mind, that's what you use to approach attainment of God realization. That will be the doorway in which you will have your first non-dual experiences. As the mind is realized that activity is not the main point of life, and that inactivity is actually beckoning it. Inaction, not just action. And it's approaching that attainment of God realization in that way. And as far as in nature, then you see that perceiving the unity of Purusha and Prakriti is going to be possible there. Shiva and Shakti, the oneness of Shiva and Shakti are there. Like beings are singing about that even in India. Kokono Purusha, Kokono Prakriti, Kokono Shunya Rupare. Kokono Purusha, Kokono Prakriti, Kokono Shunya Rupare. Kamalakanta O babaji Sahaja Paga Hulore. Kamalakanta O babaji Sahaja Paga Hulore Shama Baki Amar Hulore Shama Baki Amar Kalore. Oh, Divine Mother of the Universe, Kamalakanta sings, you are beyond the power of the universe that you created. You have many names and forms without number, all full of auspiciousness. The great Lord Shiva has become thoroughly enchanted by you. You who give existence to all things in the universe. He goes on, more pertinent to the chart. People say that you are black, but my mind tells me you're not always so. I think sometimes you're white, sometimes yellow, sometimes blue or red, if you want to go color-coding things. And before I did not know what Mother was. In reflecting on her, my whole life have passed away. And now I know her secret, that she is sometimes male, sometimes female. That kokono purusha, kokono prakriti. Sometimes she appears as beings, and sometimes she appears in nature. And sometimes you're beyond all form entirely. Kamalakanta is amazed to see how Shiva has become mad with ecstasy by meditating on her radiant splendor. So he's talking about this state of mind where Mother reveals herself through nature, and Purusha and Prakriti can then come together, and Shiva and Shakti can be one cohesive whole, as they always are. Before, the tantric teachings is that they bifurcate. They were always one at first, and then they separate, and she hums, and he hears the word Om. He falls into ecstasy, and his mind begins to vibrate, his pure mind. Then all these 24 tattvas, the upper 12 tattvas, start vibrating, and then those turn into the lower 24 tattvas, and they start vibrating, all in a succession of intensity. And all the time then, they remain hidden behind this play. So he said, my mind meditates on this, trying to see what's behind this play of consciousness. And now I found her secret, he says at one point. So that's just like Te Dhyan Yoga, Pata, Yogata Passion. They found the Divine Mother, the Devatma Shakti, and they found the power in everything by meditating on her radiant splendor. She was their very intellects, but their intellects were still dull. I think they had to hone them and remember their Dharma. It's just not basically a matter of forgetfulness, it's a matter of remembrance. So the three gunas of nature color-coded for you, and in 6 different divisions rather than 3. Now let's go straight away to this chart that I hope I brought. There it is. Called Gunas of Prakriti and Vrittis of Yoga. So you'll be the first ones to see this. As it was just printed a couple days ago. And basically the overlay of it all, of course, is just you can see these 2 great armies as waves just coming out of the ocean of relativity and begin about ready to clash with one another. And you could see the asuras on one side with all their forces and their leaders, and then the gods and Indra, and then the Trinity looking on, and then the sattvic forces of the suras. It would be suras and asuras, or gods and demigods, or how you might call them in the Roman philosophy. That had words for those kinds of pantheons too, and even in other traditions. So titans and so forth. So you can see these 2 great waves coming together, and up the middle there you can see tamas, rajas, and sattva just permeating the whole scene. From the light of the sun, where the light of Brahman, where the Trinity is viewing, they can see the whole thing having its inception, and the gunas there on the scene first as these powers of nature. We're again calling them modes instead of moods. And there's, of course, the poor earth, with receiving the brunt of the force of these opposite forces, always fighting in the heavens and all the way down to the nether realms, and with the earth in between being pressed, as it were. The whole birth, life, death, rebirth, the process that's going on, and the churning that happens there. At the top, the quote says, "Until the gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas are curbed, the mental vibrations springing from the individual, collective, and cosmic mind will reflect a continual flux of good, mixed, and bad results. Knowing this, the seers attain to stillness of thought and transcendence of the modes of Prakriti, and abide peacefully and blissfully beyond nature and mind." So this is their perspective, their preferred mode of existence is to be in that non-dual state that's not influenced by the gunas. If they were to venture away from that at all, they would probably use sattva, pure sattva, to reflect some of their powers or to reach human beings. Like the vision of the gods and the Trinity, or what we often call the Mahat, meditating on the Mahat, the great mind. Now, as you see on one side, the Gunas Vrittis, with the tamasic level of things, leaning into the rajasic, and the Gunas Vrittis here more with the sattvic forces, the forces of light, forces of darkness, if you want to put it that way. So some of these Gunas Vrittis are, at the most tamasic level, would be the dull and depressed mind that we see so much today, and people being trapped in it, not being able to rise out of it. It's very difficult to get the mind, as probably all of us know, to get the mind out of a dark place that it falls into for whatever reasons. Vishada vritti. So vrittis are thoughts. So here's where the gunas of tamas are really influencing the minds of many human beings and beings who are in nether realms that are departed spirits that are rather lost. They talk about the 7 patalas in that case. There's the 7 higher realms that you could Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, and so forth, but you could even put them across the board with the Muladhara, Svadhisthana, and Manipura chakras, 7 of those chakras, 3 below, 3 above, and the heart chakra right in the middle, as they say. So here in this darkness of tamas that overcomes so many people, and particularly of this world, that's called Vishada. And we know that that's the name of the first chapter of the Gita, because it's called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, because Arjuna has fallen into that darkness. And so he's having to deal with that, but he's got a great soul filled with pure sattva, or established in the non-dual perfection of his own awareness, there on the battlefield with him, though he doesn't know it yet. But he does know that soul is his friend, his eternal companion, really, but he does know that he's his friend. Vitarka vritti is demonic, violent kind of thought. Shushna vritti, false, dishonest, deceitful. Of course, these words, we know vitarka is a word for, there's about 17 definitions for it I found in Sanskrit. So here we're using it as that argumentative. It's not just discussion and debate and reasoning, but it's also got this connotation of argumentation, always being on the opposite side just for the sake of that. So that's a vibration that comes over minds, where they're just going everywhere with the ego, unripe ego, and they're thinking they know the best, nobody can tell them better. It's a kind of darkness, but it's got a little bit of rajas showing through because there's some activity to it. If you know this about the gunas, as modes instead of moods, then you can characterize these people when they come into your life. You can avoid them, as Krishna says. Be indifferent to the evil. And if you see them and you know that, then you can save yourself a lot of problem. Or you can be compassionate to those who are lost and help them. So this is good to know about the cosmic process. It's good, which is coming down one side of the cosmic principles. Also good to know about people who have lost remembrance of their true nature, and intellects have become very small, dwarfed, and mean is a good word. Shushna Vritti, false and dishonest, kind of beginning to, actually Shushna was a demon that Indra had to kill. So there's 7 or 8 different definitions for that word, Shushna. So in this case, we're using it in that Shushna also means hissing in anger. Shushna. So I think the demon Indra had to kill had a snake form. So this kind of vritti comes over a mind. It's always complaining about things, and its anger is always going on. It's demonic, as Ramakrishna said. Never give rise to anger. It's demonic, he said. Then vijatiya vritti, turbulent and confused mind, trying to get some light in it and is having a hard time. Kshaya vritti, of course, we know that has to do with the senses. They become excited and aroused, and they take refuge in pleasure. And that's a whole mindset that people fall into, and they're seeking for, they're adventurous. They want to go after these feelings and emotions to get pleasures, and they think object can fulfill them. That whole run of mindset is just a vritti that's influenced by a guna or its admixture. And so if you're going to have a solution for that kind of thing, I'll show you those in the middle. I just want to explain the 2 sides of the mind right now here. This is 2 sides of cosmic projection from the Trinity through the Mahat, through the gods, which are all interior principles. In each mind, these forces exist, and you have recourse to them, or you can reject them. So this is where building up strength and character via spiritual practices is very important, so you can keep your balance amidst this. You don't want to go right up the middle here, and before the waves break. Monoraja vritti is kind of the mind, mano, that's flighty and undecided. It's also a kind of, you can look at this also as a spiritual aspirant's meditation, where they can't ground themselves. Their mind just seems to go wandering all the time. They can't bring it back and put it in one spot, which is why they want you to master your posture first and your breath. And then you're going to have a mind that has a place to stay, whereas it can't come back to the body and use the breath, the prana, if it's erratic. Then, of course, and many of us know about this, it's getting toward chanchala vritti. That my consciousness has gaps. And, maybe at the cosmic level, you can even say that waking, dreaming, and deep sleep are gaps in your thinking, in your meditating, in your being. You're running around through three states, and never being able to settle on any of them. Like the Advaita would sing about that, because he's mastered it. And he wants us to know about it, how he did it, and what the result of it is. When he sings about samsara. Samsara satati rajo nachame vikara santapa satati nacha nechame vikara Satvam swadharma janakam Nachame vikara Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. Starting out with the very word samsara, he says to us about this, the gunas of Rajas, the guna of Rajas fabricates and drives the world, not I. And suffering that attends it is the work of tamas, not of myself. Even that sought-after happiness brought to bear by sattva is not my doing. For I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. Puts it in pretty simple terms for us, doesn't it? So this is the conclusion of a great soul who has examined the cosmic process, see how his thoughts got influenced by the gunas, and decided he would pull himself up and out of it by the bootstraps, if you will, expressed in the world. So then the intermittent gaps in his consciousness, he resolved them away. I'm going to remain constant, and I'll start building virtues. So you've probably met people with virtues, run into them like we ran into Lex Hickson, our founder, when we were in our 20s, carrying around a great light and established in it all the time. Very positive. I mean, definitely, at least he had that first quality, that first vritti, utsaha. It's called enthusiasm. So there are people who are just enthusiastic about everything they're doing, but they're also enthusiastic about what you're doing. If you look back on the color-coded chart, you know, you're beginning to help beings, see God in beings. So you really want their success, especially if you've already attained it. I've already got what I want. You know, now let's look into you doing the same. Or if you want to put that on this side, it's Vivekananda's saying is, when will man be friend to man? Because they're all jealous of each other in my country. And he came here and he saw the same with the Americans. They're all miserly and they're all jealous. And so if you want to take the 6 passions, lust, anger, jealousy, pride, greed, shame, all these, and take Swami Vivekananda's favorite picks for this particular day, you'd probably run into jealousy and greed. Miserliness is 2 of them right off the bat. And he wanted people to get over that and not be man unkind, be mankind again, and help each other. It's a very simple thing to do, and it's also a way of getting yourself out of negative thoughts to serve others. Take the whole emphasis off of I, me, mine, and put it on thou, thee, and thine, they say. So that's an Aklista vritti. Klista means pain-bearing. Aklista means being free of pain in Patanjali's way of explaining it. Nishchaya vritti, then there you have that resolve that the person has. Like, what greater resolve than the Advaita just said? You know, and just pure existence, knowledge and bliss, infinite like the sky. He's absolutely certain of that. And he's got the courage of his convictions. Prasana vritti, clarity. Prasana is a kind of clarity, almost from the word prasad. So, you know, people who are named Prasana, we've come upon, particularly in India. So they have that, they should have, or working to have that absolute clarity of mind. And it will become a vritti. Here we're using the word vritti is not just one thought that came across my mind and left, and hopefully will come back later, or not, as the case may be. I hope that darkness doesn't come back, or I hope that light will come back. It's not that anymore. It's like your whole mindset has become that vritti. You know, fire takes on the shape of the object it's burning, so your mind is going to take on the shape of that higher quality, and it's going to become that. It's going to burn that till it consumes it, and once it consumes it, then it's free. So one's looking forward with enthusiasm, in a very resolved way, to that clarity of mind that will come, that will give them absolute freedom from all things invested with the gunas. And Gunas Vrittis, there are people who are just walking around with this discriminating wisdom. It's the don't leave home without it kind of thing, if you put it in Lord Vasishtha's teachings. Never go to earth without this discriminating wisdom, or you'll end up in the hospital of the world with lots of diseases. You want to avoid those, because all diseases begin in the mind, according to him. He was the father of that teaching. And the first disease of all of them is rebirth. Yeah. Two powerful teachings in Vasishtha's yoga that stand out. Samprasada vritti is tranquility. Samprasada is one of the four moods of, in that way you could use moods in a higher yoga psychology way. There's adhyatma prasad, and there's samprasad, and there's anaprasad, that's food. You want to have pure food to eat, and so forth. So there's these kinds of prasad that don't just mean physical food, but they're actually, the thoughts become your food. And so you want to make sure those are pure, organic, and non-violent, let's just put it that way. Samatva vritti is almost can't get any higher than that. Oh, it just can't get any better than this, said the cowboy out in the desert around the fireplace at night with a six-pack of beer. It just can't get any better than this, can it? So if you're a spiritual cowboy, like a Paniolu, like we have around here, then you're going to want to say, it doesn't get any better than this equality of mind I've got right now. I'm not thinking bad nor good, higher nor lower, best nor worst. That doesn't occur to me anymore. I'm just pure consciousness, existence, and bliss, and that's what I prefer to be. And that leads to Sharma Krista's favorite word of that nature, samasta chitta. It's universal mind. We've been talking about that lately. That universal mind that looks at any religion and says, that's my religion. That's not a foreign religion at all. It's indigenous to all souls. So a mind that is that single-pointed, like third eye pointed, or Agya Chakra pointed, will have that samasta chitta as its highest rung of the ladder of aklista vrittis. That's what you're leading to, and you're leading to it to retain it and maintain it from then on. You probably won't want to go back. And if you had to go back, probably some little stone unturned somewhere in your consciousness, in your practice, then you'll be able to do so with a foundation under you. And there's a sattvic balance there that you want, that you can keep and higher. So Gaudapada says at the bottom, I always have to bring in a non-dual if I'm a follower of Swami Vivekananda and so forth. So basically, you can leave it in the realm of klista, aklista, higher, lower, better, worse. But good, better, and best. The best is the non-dual, to bring the non-dual in and show that's the light behind everything. That's what's there before the gunas fell out of equilibrium. Equilibrium is what you want your mind to be in. The gunas are looking to fall out of equilibrium. That's their nature. That's what they're going to do whenever the first vibration enters the mind of the Trinity, like Lord Brahma. Oops, there come the gunas. And how am I going to deal with them? But if you're Lord Brahma, of course, his realms are very sattvic, they say. If you were to see the projector of all this, along with his two great eternal companions, Vishnu and Shiva, but they talk about the Divine Trinity and the Mahat that they use, the great mind they used, which will give rise to all of this, all of it, at all of its levels, all of its vibrations. And all the minds that get colored and influenced by it, hopefully, they'll have beings to show them not to become tainted by it. Like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, smoke, will stain a window. It's a good God block. But it'll pass through a screen. So you want to be the screen. Your mind has to be the screen. And you'll probably have to wash that every once in a while too, in a polluted city or when the volcano goes off here. But the windows, it's going to be very obvious that that's going to mar your view. And those gunas will influence the mind. The gunas will influence the vrittis and stain the samskaras, and the karmas will become dark, and tamas will be the result. So there will be realms in the dream called hell, and people moving in and out of them. Atala, Pitala, Kala Kala, Tala Tala. There are 7 hell realms below earth, where the Buddhists say that there are hungry ghosts, and beings that, kept wealth from others, so they have to suffer a hell without wealth, without anything, impoverished, and all that stuff even exists here on earth, really. But these are disembodied states. This is an embodied version of it. It's not one of the subjects that Vedanta entertains very much, but I tend to bring it up because of my Tibetan Buddhist initiation. So Gaudapada says here, bringing in that non-dual part, the mind vibrates in dream to produce false objects, and in the waking state it does the same. Mind in deep sleep comes under the spell of ignorance and has its tendencies lying dormant. So we're just saying waking, dreaming, deep sleep, so forth. So now Gaudapada has just told us pretty much what those 3 are. All this duality is brought about by mind vibration. Yet the mind remains non-dual throughout. The true mind enjoys the samadhi of Brahman all the time. So it pretty much to the source of it and strikes deep. Advaita would concur if you were to take recourse to his teachings, like this one. Niskampa kampa nidanam navikalpa kalpam swapna prabodha nidanam nahitam hitam hi nishara sara nidanam nahitam hitam hi gyanamritam samarasam Ganalopamoham Stanatrayam Yadichane Katam Turiyam Kalam Trayam Yadichane Katam Dishascha Shantam Padam Hi Paramam Param Tappa Tattvam Gyanamritam Samarasam Gaganopamoham Gyanamritam Samarasam Gaganopamoham. You probably heard all the key words there. Swapna, Turiya, all these states of consciousness he's talking about. He describes it this way: stillness and vibration, along with doubt and determination, disappear in the ultimate Brahman. So remember, we're at Gaudapada now. We're not in yoga or practice or anything. Stillness and vibration, along with doubt and determination, disappear in the ultimate Brahman. So does the duality of virtue and vice, thus morality and immorality as well. Even the waking state and dream dissolve away there. And you are just pure consciousness, existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. I do not know of a fourth state, then, when the first three are already non-existent. The 4, 8, and 16 directions surely cannot exist when the three phases of time are seen to be unreal. Throughout it all, for me, Brahman is the only abode of peace. And I am that. I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. So 40 verses from the Advaita's great Advaita Gita there. And we call that the Advaita Chalisa now. Taken those verses out of that, made it into a song for the first time. And such great teachings, even in English. I talk about empowering the English language with wisdom. There it is. So the chart actually was a lot simpler to give than I thought. It's over already. But there's plenty more to come about it. I think in the time remaining in the first half, I told you that we would look at the Gunas Vrittis and non-Gunas Vrittis, but where's the solution? I mean, this is sort of the before and after phase of, having dealt with the gunas. If you're a awakened soul, a conscious soul, a sensitive soul, an aspiring soul, an enthused soul, because Maya, once it's gone, you don't remember what it was like. When it comes back, you can't figure it out why it's there, if you're that kind of soul. Like Lord Brahma putting his mind-born son, Vashishta, into a trance. Come here, son, one day. See, this is up in the Brahmaloka. In the Brahmaloka. Come here, son. And he does an experiment on it, puts his hand on his head. All of a sudden, Vashishta just doesn't feel himself at all. Everything's chaos. His usual samasta chitta mind is gone. And he's just stunned and doesn't know what to say, and is suffering. And then Lord Brahma put his hand on his head again and lifted off. See, Father, what did you do to me? I just felt horrible. And so Lord Brahma questioned him about how he felt. And so Vashishta, probably the first psychiatrist's couch ever, happened in the Brahmaloka, right? Lord Brahma said, how'd you feel about that, son? First time that question ever got asked, which is a tiring question to us by now, I know. Feelings and all. But basically, when Vashishta asked him why he did that to him, why my dear father put me in that state, and then Lord Brahma said, because you're going to earth in your next lifetime, and they're waiting for you there. And you have to know how it feels to have forgotten your peace, and your bliss, your existence, your wisdom. You have to know how they feel there, and how desperate they are, some of them, to get it back. And they don't know why the reasons for why they're suffering. Some of them are going to hate you, revile you. Just read the Beatitudes, Jesus, and you can see that he was saying much the same thing. And others, he said, will revile you. Some will not be able to hear what you're saying. But you must look for those who have the 4 qualifications, basically. If they have the 4 fruits, the 4 sadhana chatushtaya, discrimination, detachment, all those, then give them this truth and remind him, that they wake up out of that dream called Maya, get beyond the influence of the 3 gunas, and return to their natural mode of thinking, like the Advaita's thinking all the time, or not thinking, as the case may be. He had to think and use words, so he came out of that state like Buddha did, and sang this to us in the pure Sanskrit. The Sanskrit to this is marvelous. The Sanskrit happened in different time spans. The Sanskrit of the Gita is like a lot different than the Sanskrit of the Upanishads. And the Sanskrit of the opposite uses is again quite different from that. So it's a very broad, deep language, and it's seen many eons of time, many beings, and it's been used by many illumined beings. That's what makes it a truly sacred language, I think. So it's Deva Bhashya. It's the language of the gods, they call it. So in that way, it's expressing the experiences that the illumined souls have had over many lifetimes, and how they've done this so that they can keep the Dharma present in a world like this, so that a Lord Vasishtha could come along and take incarnation here and be heard by some of us, so it could gather some force, snowball down a hill style, like Vivekananda was saying. And there's a story of a devotee of Vasishtha standing in a river. He went to the river Ganges and bathed. And so all of a sudden he just thought of, while he was in the river, he thought of his god, Vasishtha, and just had a deep meditation standing there still in the river. And Vasishtha felt it up in Brahmaloka. My devotee is thinking about me. I must go there. And so he came down into the personage of that, through these nadis, into the personage of his devotee, and gave him samadhi, and freed him from all the impositions and superimpositions and vagaries and vexations of the earth plane, and fulfilled his yearning. And so it's this connection between this outer realm and the inner realm is immediate like that. If you think about the Lord is there. If the Lord thinks about you, same. Because you're one with that. I and my Father are one. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedanti, as we were talking about just recently, in the Rig Veda, way back in the ancient scriptures. So, Gunas of Prakriti, Vrittis of Yoga, this new chart. Let's look, as I was about saying, in the time remaining, which is, I'm not sure, about 10 minutes maybe, we could entertain the solutions here to get to here. I mean, it's probably not that easy to say, well, I can just be like this, with everything that's in your mind and in the world, and in the gunas, and in the process, in the karmas, the collective karmas, your ancestors. I mean, all these things are rising up like these waves every day and getting in your way. And sometimes they're doing it inobtrusively, subtly, and sometimes it's very blatant what happens. And you have to read it and respond to it correctly. So this chart, although we won't take the whole thing, has to do with this pratibhasika, is how you're living in an illusory reality. It's not actually real. And I've listed these very vrittis in this chart some time ago. And you can see them down the left-hand side and their solutions on the right. But the quote here, using all the different variations of one Sanskrit word, pratibhasika is illusory reality, pratibha is intelligence, which is developed and honed to bring about the power of pratibandha kabhava. So pratibha, probably that's the one word most of my students are familiar with, because Sri Ramakrishna had called it flint-like intelligence, that a flint will strike sparks even when it's wet. Take it out of a river after 1,000 years, if it's wet, it'll strike sparks. So that's this deep intelligence in the devotees, and the lovers of divine reality, who will not forget over lifetimes. Like I just chanted at the beginning of the class, Te, Dhyan, Yoga, Nugata, Passion. The ancient seers of India, through the power of meditation, the yoga of meditation, recalled the Devatma Shakti to mind. So they will go about like Vasishtha going to earth, sent there by Lord Brahma, a mind-born son going to earth. Immediately they'll be right on about their father's business. It's amazing. It's miraculous. You don't see this happening usually. And they seem to be veiled, and maybe they have veils over them for a time. But it's almost a game with them. Who can awaken sooner, on Earth? It'll take me 8 years. Well, it only took me 6. I'm better than you. I made it the goal faster than you. So it's all about awakening to the fact this world's not real. Objects can't fulfill you. Time and space are not real. That's their goal, to remember that as quick as possible in the body. And all other beings are just tripping through Maya, suffering at every step. And some people are clinging, to the body as if it was the only reality. Just the shocking difference between awakened souls and sleeping souls. And we want to then study these awakened souls and these fully awake souls. So what are the solutions that they would give to these problems? There you see them. Vishada Vritti, we called that dull, dejection, despondent. So the pratibandhika bhava is the solution. The pratibandhika itself is the obstacle. And your intelligence, pratibha, is going to be what's going to help you there. This is a Vedantic stance. Yes, I've said before, love is the essence of everything, but you can't know love until you get rid of ignorance with knowledge. It's pretty much just that simple, and that's the way, the stance of many of these darshanas of India, these great seers, take that stance. We can compare notes later, Vivekananda said, but right now we have to be about doing away with this false thinking. And so, if you have these dual vibrations, this is why the darshanas of India start you off with breathing. All yoga starts off with breathing. Even hatha will probably want to start you off with some posture, but then some breathing. But to do that, in order to awaken your consciousness so that prana can become smooth without spikes, and can be a vehicle, the carrier of consciousness, they call prana, the god of prana, is the carrier of consciousness in the Rig Veda. So you want your consciousness to get on that Garuda bird and take you straight to your source. Every time you meditate, every time you wake in the morning, every lifetime you have, the quicker you wake up, the better, so that you can live a dharmic life, a divine life, and help others, as Holy Mother said. Now that you have Sri Ramakrishna, your matters are settled. You just have to have faith in that. Your matters are settled. And now won't you help and turn and help others on your way to him? So if you wanted to accomplish two things with one. We were talking last night about the kill two birds with one stone, but since we're nonviolent people, we don't like that thing. We decided we didn't like that very much. But we'll accomplish these two great goals with one effort, if we can keep that in mind. Back to the color-coded meaning of the sattva guna and its pure sattva. So pranayama and manana, conscious breathing accompanied with contemplation of scripture, they're going to start you at a high level. Blade cuts high. Remember bartering with Indian shopkeepers in India. They say, well, I want 140 rupees for that. Oh, well, give me an offer. I'll give you 70. Oh, sir, you're cutting way down here. Would you please cut higher? So that's what you have to do here with the teachings. You have to go to a higher cut and try it on. You'll be surprised at how much your consciousness knows already that's been covered by the covering power itself. Tamas, Rajas. You know those triputis, whether it's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or whether it's waking, dreaming, or deep sleep, or whether it's AUM of Om. Then you've got Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. And so all of these triputis can almost be connected across the board, and you can just look at how all these connections are going on and master them. So in this way, you're going to want to change those dual vibrations of the mind. And breathing is just a natural way to do that. It's also a natural way to get rid of anger. Count to 10 is the way they used to say that here in the West. You get angry. Oh, before you do anything, count to 10. Because by the time you reached 10, you were like your anger had started to subside and your mind was going in a different direction. I remember getting that teaching in grade school. Vitarka Vritti was next on our new chart we studied. So these demonic vibrations that rise, what do I do with them? Because they give rise to violence, foster violence. So Indriya Nigraha Nirodha, control the senses and restrain the negative thoughts. That might be what anyone would tell you, but this is an actual effort that you have to make, because nobody's going to want to touch you in that state. Go to your room. Go to the corner and sit facing it. But if you yourself can overcome these kinds of thoughts before they happen. I was trying to think of a metaphor for that years ago, and I thought, well, basically, if somebody drops a rock in a pool, clear, still pool, and the vibrations go out, you see, and you're sitting on the other side of the lake with your big toe, like in the water, and meditating in perfect silence, all of a sudden you feel these ripples hit it. See? That's like anger coming. And so sensitive souls, in their meditations, can see anger coming before it happens. It's like they know the cosmic process, and they know that there's some force out there, and it's a time for it to manifest. It's not God's doing or the devil's doing, it's just a natural gear rolling in the natural process. It's coming around with a tarnished tooth, and you're going to have to deal with that somehow. So they can steel themselves against anger, lust, envy, pride, greed, shame, pride of caste, pride of lineage, delusion, 6 passions and the 8 fetters, with that kind of sensitivity. And other people are just throwing everything to the 4 directions and just having to bear this karma come back on them. And usually it comes back at the worst possible time, as we've seen happen. And it's true with everything from the disease of war, which we'll see in the next half, all the way down to individual life with your friends and family. So I think we've used up our time, but we've at least entered into this. Control the senses and the restraint of negative thoughts. One more, there's that Gunas Vrittis, mental vibrations beset by falsehood and disease leading to suffering. They want you to use yamas and niyamas. Practice of the moral exercises and daily observances of the Raja Yoga system, which is a great powerful system, also called Patanjala, and also called Ashtanga. So this great system has been a gift of Lord Patanjali, but it has been there in different forms since the earliest of time. This is like the great yoga of meditation. And remember, he said here, if you had depression, you should use breathing with study of scripture. Remember, in my own early time, but living in a bare house when I was 19, 20, nothing in it except a mat on the floor, huge place. Here in Hawaii, and I could see the ocean in the distance. So basically, I would sit down with Viveka Chudamani, or Trigdrisha Viveka, or one of these scriptures, Avadhuta Gita, and my mind wouldn't be very inspired. The next day, I was just like totally into it. So back then, I wasn't thinking in terms of the gunas changing. The gunas changing, and that's what it does. Don't worry about it. But I wasn't also thinking, control it. You can control it with certain exercises. You're going to have to stem that tide before it turns into a wave. And the stemming of it is going to give you a subtle muscle by which you'll be able to resist all other infractions or impositions on your otherwise peaceful consciousness. So here, let's take a 15-minute break, come back, look at some more solutions.